Welcome back to episode 8 of Let's Talk. Let's talk about women's sports. Today with me, I have my pseudo sister because of our fathers hosting the same show. So we have an experience that nobody else can share of our insane fathers talking on the show together. I have with me today Ainsley Erzen. Ainsley, why don't you do a little intro for yourself? Tell the people who you are, a little bit about yourself.
Hi, yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. It's definitely like a girls' edition of the Steve Day show here, so that's kind of fun.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, I'm Ainsley. I am a junior at the University of Arkansas, and I'm currently running track and playing soccer for the Razorbacks. And I've also been involved in the lawsuit against the NCAA to defend women's sports. So that's pretty much what I've been up to lately.
Just nothing much.
Right.
Not busy at all. Not busy at all. It's totally fine. So so let's start with just like a little bit of backstory to kind of give people maybe if they haven't heard of you or anything kind of like a little bit about yourself. So when did your love for like track and soccer, as you just mentioned, really begin?
Yeah, I have three little sisters, so my parents put all of us in soccer really from the moment we could like walk. I was playing soccer when I was like 4, not well, but I was playing. So that's when I started to love sports and just love being competitive. And then when I was in 7th grade, that's when track and cross country starts through school. So that's when I started running and really have just grown in my love for both of them ever since, and obviously haven't stopped. So.
So, you talk a little bit about being in, soccer and doing all these sports as a kid, which I feel like a lot of people do. They get into something and then it's kind of like, oh, I'm just doing this because I'm a kiddo and this is what my parents wanted me to do. But when did, all of the sports that you're in really become a serious career path for you? Like, I want to and I need to be doing these things.
Yeah, there was definitely a really big turning point for me going from middle school to high school, just because when you're an eighth grader and you're looking at all of the high schoolers, they're all so big and so talented, and you kind of idolize them a little bit. So
Hmm.
once I got to that level and just saw I could hang with them, whether it was on the field or on the track, that was huge for me. And then also just being surrounded with the people I was surrounded with. I had coaches and parents who are always just breathing life into me and assuring me of the talents God has given me and how far I could go with them. So that was really big. And then my junior year of high school, I got to go to Oregon for my first national championship meet. And I won the meet and set the state record in the 800. So that was probably the biggest kind of eye-opening moment for me. I hadn't gone to a lot of big meets in the past, so that was really big. And just also having other girls um, who pushed me, even girls I hadn't raced against. When I ran the state record, I had been looking at a specific time over and over again for years that previous Iowa girl had set, and just having that time in the back of my head helped so much to kind of propel me forward and give me a goal to chase.
So clearly, as you've been kind of alluding to, like you've been in this for a while, like doing women's sports and meeting a lot of women who are passionate about their sports. And obviously, women's sports has been basically the main I would say one of the main topics of conversations, politically and just like even everywhere I go. I feel like a lot of political issues don't reach, you know, public schools or like Christian schools or anything. Like they don't reach people even our age or in high school because it's like, oh, that's adult stuff or oh, that's stuff that I don't need to deal with yet. But women's sports and like men in women's sports, I feel like is everywhere. I feel like that's a conversation that everyone is having. And so my next question to you is, when did you start noticing the shift in women's sports from, being empowering towards women to being empowering towards men pretending to be women?
Yeah, so my senior year of high school, the Iowa Girls Athletic Union put out a statement basically saying, hey, this is a growing issue. We have transgender athletes competing in women's sports. What should we do about it? And that's frustrating no matter what as a girl to hear that. But Iowa is one of the only states in the entire country that has a separate governing body for women and for men. So we're one of the only states with a girls' athletic union. So to have that space that was literally created just to protect women,
Mm,
and then to have them asking, hey, what should we do about this issue that's clearly hurting women,
yeah.
was really frustrating for me. And I was fortunate enough to have connections with, obviously, our dads being in the careers they are, and
Yes.
to kind of write how I was feeling about it, and I think how all girls were feeling about it, but were too scared to say, and get it published in the Des Moines Register. So that's how I really got thrown into everything. But that was really, really the turning point for me. And then shortly after was all the stuff with Riley Gaines and Leah Thomas, which
Mm-hmm.
obviously magnified it even further on the national level.
I would say that event is definitely, I feel like, what started, getting people noticing that and everything. And, speaking about that, your Des Moines Register article, I was reading that actually today. And, so you wrote, quote, there's no explanation for the performance gap except for biological differences, because you were kind of just talking about, like, how come, we're running the same race, yet my numbers are this way and their numbers are this way. And I'm one of the best in my field, and yet they're always going to beat me because of, like I just read in that quote, biological differences. And so, you kind of talked about, like, they sent out this letter, they were kind of informing you guys this was going down, but what really was something within you or a situation that happened that you were like, this is why I feel the need to write this letter? Because I feel like a lot of the times it's hard for, people our age, because you and I are pretty young compared to like a lot of like older conservative women. And by older, I mean like not even that much older, but just I feel like the difference between like being in your 20s and in college or whatever, and then like being, in your 30s is like two different worlds. Because it's like when you're in your 30s, you have all this confidence because you've already been through all these difficult things. And then when you're younger, I feel like a lot of people struggle to, for example, like I talk a lot on the show about how I did a lot of theater in the Des Moines community. And it was extremely hard for me when things started to get like really, crazy and hit the fan to stand up for what I believed in. And so when they sent you this, why did you feel the need to kind of come back and have something to say publicly about it?
Yeah, I think it was a couple of things. Definitely just all the silence it was met with to begin with. Like I said, this was right almost exactly at the same time the stuff with Leah Thomas was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, this had been going on for a while, but not at the extent that it was, and it wasn't getting nearly as much publicity. Um, and I think some people were just so shocked and like, there's no way this is happening because this is insanity. And other people understood what was happening but were too scared to speak out.
Yeah.
And like you said, there are like older, probably more articulate, like more experienced people out there who should have been saying something. I mean, entire governing bodies should have been saying something and they weren't. And so there was that, first of all, just the lack of anything being said, where I knew someone had to do it. And then also just the way I was raised. I mean, I was fortunate enough to have parents who had instilled really strong Christian values in me and had taught me if something's wrong, like
Mm-hmm.
you need to be the one to step up and say something. Um, and so it was definitely scary, especially being in high school. You're in a very fixed environment with a lot of people with very strong, mostly uneducated
Yes.
opinions. But at the end of the day, it's scarier to say nothing in situations like this than to say something.
So was there ever a time where you hesitated, in standing up for, women's sports at all?
Yeah, I don't even necessarily think I wasn't willing to do it. I think I more hesitated because I was like, surely there are people out there that are better suited to do
Mm.
it. Um, and I actually got the privilege to go speak with Allie Beth Stuckey on her podcast shortly after I started doing all of it, and I kind of expressed that to her. And it was one of the first podcasts I got to do right when it all started. And she told me God doesn't call the equipped, he equips the called. And that's something that stuck with me so much just
Mm.
throughout all the rest of the time I've been doing this, because I know that there are people out there that are, smarter, stronger, more experienced, more articulate. But at the end of the day, like I was put in a situation where I had a platform where I could speak out. And I know as long as I'm willing to answer that call, God will equip me with the things I need to do it.
That's good. That's good. And so, kind of like you said just a little bit before and at the beginning. So in March of last year, which is crazy because I'm still not used to the fact that 2024 was last year and not
I
this
know.
year. Like I'm still that person that is like writing 2024 on everything because
Yep.
it feels too weird. And 2024 also felt like 8 lifetimes.
Mhm.
But in March of last year, the Des Moines Register again reported that you had joined in a lawsuit against the NCAA. So why don't you just tell us honestly all about that in your own words?
So after Riley Gaines kind of started becoming more vocal, just kind of honestly a public figure at this point.
Mhm.
A group called Icons reached out to her to basically fund this lawsuit against the NCAA, just say enough is enough, like they cannot be silent longer, they have to make a decision. So Riley reached out to me just through the work I had done in Iowa, knew a little bit about who I was, and asked if it was something I'd like to be a part of. So I ended up joining that last year, and ever since it's been a slow process, but it's definitely beneficial. It's definitely breaking ground, especially now, just like we saw the recent decisions with the House and then the Senate. But yeah, so I've just been honored to be able to have connections with people like Riley and Icons, and then also recently XXXY, all just organizations that are making people uncomfortable in the right ways, I would say, and
Mhm.
forcing people to finally admit that this is crazy and this has been going on too long and women deserve so much better.
So break down for, the women, girls, whatever. Break down for them what the lawsuit is about. Because I feel like a lot of times, I think that, and not you specifically, but I just feel like as Christians, but also like as conservatives, sometimes we have like a way of talking in our own language. Do you know what I'm saying? Where it's like we
Yeah.
know what's happening, and it's like this like inner like circle thing, and then
Mm-hmm.
like people that are trying to learn more about it are like, I don't know what any of this means. I don't know what you guys are doing. Like, why are
Yeah.
we talking like this? So break it down a little bit about like why is there a lawsuit? Like, what is the lawsuit about, etc.
Yeah. So basically, right now, the NCAA has, for all intents and purposes, no regulations or laws around transgender athletes. They'll say they have a few. At the end of the day, they don't. The few that they have are more based on like very just things with very little research. Some of them are on
Mm,
testosterone. And at the end of the day, a lot of them have been disproven to be beneficial or work whatsoever in actually eliminating the performance gap. And then outside of just competition alone, the NCAA has basically completely opened women's locker rooms to men. So if you
mm,
are a man that identifies as a woman, you're free to use the spaces, more or less no questions asked. Like you don't have to have full surgeries, nothing. So you could basically be a man with like full male genitalia, walk into the women's locker room and say, I'm a girl, it's okay. And
mm.
women have to be okay with that. So it's more than just competing on the field. Like it's women's like privacy,
Yeah.
dignity, really everything that's at stake. So that's what the lawsuit is really about, combating all of those issues and saying women's spaces, women's competitions belong to women, which shouldn't have to be said. And I think
Mm.
a lot of the times that's why even I like struggle to break it down correctly sometimes because
Yeah.
it's just such basic common sense. But that's what the lawsuit is doing.
So as you've been, working with, doing the lawsuit or like writing the letter, like when I read a little portion of that, you know, I think it's hard for people, just like you said, it's hard for you to understand like why isn't this common sense? But as you've been interacting with, for lack of a better term, the opposite side or whatever, why do you think that there is this hesitancy? Like you talked about, like I, for some reason, girl from Iowa, have to do this and write this letter and say something. But it's like, why? But it's like, what you were like, why aren't governing officials, saying things? Where do you think the hesitation comes from? Do you think that these people actually think that men can be women, or do you think it's basically become a popularity contest?
Yeah, I think unfortunately it has become a lot of a popularity contest, and officials are just scared because they don't want to say the wrong thing and offend people. And at the end of the day, the truth is the truth, whether or not it's offensive. And I think compassion has also been weaponized almost against a lot of people. and distracts from the facts. So you're seeing, even with some girls I got to speak with about a month ago who are facing this issue pretty seriously. The San Jose State volleyball stuff, they had a man on their team, and their coaches basically just told them, we're not going to do anything about it, like team captains. This is your issue. You can talk to the individual yourselves, and then you can all vote on whether or not you want him to stay. And so then the man gets the opportunity to basically tell their story about whatever they're going to say. This is, I need this is what's keeping me alive, like all
Yeah.
of the things that you hear in the media. And then they're like, okay, girls, now vote. And that's things that's happening all across the country with these issues. And so they're weaponizing like women's compassion against them.
Mhm.
And obviously these are things that need to be addressed. Obviously all life has value. Like, something that needs to be taken very seriously, but at the end of the day, sports are a competition of bodily ability, your physical performance, and that has nothing to do with your identity. And nobody is saying these people can't compete. They're saying that when it comes to sports, this is something that can't be compromised. It's unsafe, it's unfair, it's violating, and that's what needs to be protected just for the sake of women. And I do think that conservative voices and just the side of common sense is the most popular right now, but I
Mhm.
think that kind of the more liberal side is unfortunately the loudest in a lot of cases. And I think that's why officials are scared.
And I definitely think it comes down to how you were saying, popularity, because I've even had, friends of mine who are liberals who would tend to vote that way tell me, I mean, in private conversations, like, I do think it's whack, men and women's spaces, whether that's sports or whether that's just bathrooms or, things that are sacred to women's privacy. But then, you see them retweeting or reposting like stuff on Instagram all the time, like in support, and it basically becomes like, you know, when I feel like being a liberal means at this point everything's okay. And so if you say even one thing, you're so afraid of like offending that one person that
Mhm.
then becomes like the main voice. And so, even in that, what you were just talking about, how those girls basically, I mean, they had to vote in front of this dude who's probably, like you said, tugging at those woman, heartstrings, because we are compassionate people, we are, maternal. And so we're watching somebody, basically beg us and, and all of that stuff. And so, have you experienced backlash from, fellow teammates or classmates regarding your public stand with this?
Yeah, I think in high school, especially just because you are in a much more of a bubble, I would say.
Mhm.
And that was hard stepping out into that for the first time, just because I was being in person told some things at school, but mostly just online with social media. Most people weren't brave enough to say something to my face,
Yeah.
but they would comment whatever they wanted. And so it's all name calling, and that's how you know they don't have any actual facts or evidence on their side. I mean, it the most from like bigot, sexist, even things like racist, where that obviously like
Doesn't
does
apply
not
here.
even apply to this issue. Like,
Yeah.
just ridiculous things to the point where I was like, yes, it hurts, but at the end of the day, it just shows me more and more you have nothing. Like,
Mhm.
I obviously, like, as Christians, we are called to be kind and loving and would never result to name calling no matter what, but I would never even have to because we have truth and logic and fact
Yeah.
on our side already. Like, there are so many other things for me to say before I would even think about saying anything like that. So it just shows we're on the right track even when it's hard.
Well, and it almost always comes from a place of just pure emotion. I mean, like, even when I stepped up when Matt Walsh's What Is a Woman came out,
Mhm.
and like I was really posting about that movie. I mean, I've said it before, it absolutely changed my life and my, you know, perspective, and gave me courage to like really stand up to these things when you hear it from like straight from the horse's mouth. And, a lot of these people, like, it's just pure emotion. It would never be, it was like they're feeling this way, or then it would like result into like, you want these people to be dead. Like, if you don't like support them, then you want them dead, and stuff like that. And that can be hard. And, this was only a few years ago for me, but I think about, 15, 14, 16, whatever year old girls, listening to this, and maybe they're dealing with the same situation, or they're watching their friends deal with the same situation. And so, what is your advice to them in terms of how you keep your head up, during backlash and hate?
Yeah, I think staying grounded in biblical truth is just so important. And even just looking at the life of Jesus, like he was literally the most perfect human anyone could ever be. No one will ever come close. And he was killed because people hated him so much. And that's not to obviously compare myself to Jesus, but like if you are following him to the best of your ability, people will hate you. Like
Mm-hmm.
they hated him to the point of death. So I think assuring myself of that and just having friends and family who constantly poured those things into me was so helpful. And yes, I did receive a lot of hate, but I also received so much encouragement. And I think just because on social media, especially with the previous presidency and how things were um, mediated online, you only saw the side of like very very far left. And so you like it makes you think that's the majority out there, and
Mm-hmm.
it's truly not. Like I think that's what makes people so scared to speak out most of the time, but I really do believe that the majority of people are on our side, whether they're brave enough to say it or not. And you will get way more support than you think if you're willing to put yourself out there.
Well, and I even just talked about this on another episode. One of my, if not my favorite Bible verse, John 15:18, where Jesus said, "If the world hates you, know that they hated me first." Like, I
Mm-hmm.
take, honestly, I feel like people can be like, "Wow, that's so negative." I take such pride in that, because
Mm-hmm.
especially when I'm standing up for truth, like you said, because sometimes you do feel alone, and we've talked about on previous episodes, I feel like that's the devil's, way of getting to you, is making you feel alone. And that's why a lot of the times, people only say things to you when they can't see you, because then all of a sudden you're stuck with these words and like reading them over and over again. And you feel so alone, because it's not just one interaction, then you can kind of leave and forget about it. It's like, I'm staring at this all day, or, and
Mm-hmm.
it was a little easier for me being homeschooled and not going to school, because, like, my bullies were like my siblings, so that doesn't really count. But,
Uh-huh.
like, a lot of these people are, going to schools every day where they have to hear that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really important to remember, is, exactly what you said. Jesus did absolutely nothing wrong ever, because he was 100% perfect. And these people still came for him all of the time, and they hated him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really important. And so
Yeah.
moving on is, so have you yourself ever competed against a man in track or soccer or whatever?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot. I have not personally, and I do think that's one of the things that people who disagree with me kind of try to weaponize. Um, and I just think that there cannot be a more dangerous, toxic message to send to women, that you have to be directly harmed by something before
Mm,
you are justified in speaking about it.
mm,
Like, no, it has not happened to me, but I have seen it happen over and over again across the country. And I obviously, competing at the level that I am in multiple sports, like, the chances that it could happen are
are
pretty
high,
high.
yeah.
I have obviously lots of teammates, lots of girls competing at different schools all over the country. I have three little sisters. Like, if you're not speaking out about this issue, whether you've whether you faced it or not, um, it that's a problem.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, definitely something that that persuades other women to not speak out, just because they think, since it hasn't happened to them, I don't need to say something. But I think if you apply that to any other social justice, like political issue, it
Mm-hmm.
sounds ridiculous. Like, you would never say, if you haven't faced a sexual abuse, you can't say anything about it. If you've never faced racism, you can't say anything about it. You would never say that about any other issue. Like, you see something wrong and you fight to make it right. And so, yeah, that's really been my role in this.
And so I was discussing my favorite Bible verse, John 15:18. And, clearly, as you stated, like your faith has really propelled you in this fight. So, what is a Bible verse that reference a lot?
Yeah, my favorite is in 2 Corinthians. It's 12:10 and says, I delight in weaknesses, hardships, difficulties, persecutions for the sake of Christ, for when I am weak, then I am strong. Um, and I just think that carries into, you can have it carry into any aspect of your life, and it definitely has carried into this. I think in the times when I do feel low and I do feel like unworthy of speaking out about the cause, it just reminds me that the places where I feel like I'm not strong enough, like that's where Christ is going to shine through the most, and he's going to fill those gaps and continue to carry me.
So you touched on this a little bit, but recently you've become an ambassador for, and I want to make sure, XXXY Athletics. So
Yes.
can you tell us a little bit about that and in their message?
Yeah, I think so many other brands these days are using just liberal issues to make themselves more appealing to the public, whether it's like, I mean, just look at Pride Month, how many logos are
Hmm.
changed to rainbows, and that tells you all you need to know right there. But XXXY is really was founded to do the opposite, and unlike other brands that are literally hiring transgender individuals to like model their women's clothing, or at some points even like women's swimsuits and stuff, which is insane. But XXXY was like, no, we're going to be completely pro real women. And so they started their clothing brand, and it kind of started with some just like logo t-shirts, and now has expanded to really be a full athletic wear brand. So along with my sister Tessa, have been privileged to be ambassadors for them. So we're basically just promoting their stuff and have a code for 20% off, and just really love what they do and love how they're supporting women, and brave enough to speak out about it, and endorse the lawsuit and all the things like that.
And let's not, I mean, speaking of brands who have been like totally prided over, let's not, I don't know if you remember that, but let's not forget when the infamous Dylan Mulvaney came out with his ticket
Yes.
out, I don't even know like every single brand, but the one
Uh-huh.
that sticks out to me is when he did his like Tampax, like pulled out his tampons from his purse. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, buddy, I don't want to know where that's gonna go, and
No.
I like, don't want to have this conversation with you. It's
No.
like I even saw like people who are liberals like, okay, I don't know if I can go this far.
Yeah.
It's like some of them I'm like, okay. It's like
It's
sometimes I'm like
insane.
maybe, but it's like
No.
sometimes I'm like, what is going on?
That one could not be any more degrading. Like, that's
Yeah.
absolutely insane.
Yeah, and it's like I hate it because I all of a sudden would be like, oh, like I was a huge fan of like Kate Spade purses. Like that would always
Hmm.
be like on my birthday. I was never like on the regular buying
Yeah.
Kate Spade purses, but like sometimes I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna go for my birthday, and then I remember
Hmm.
he came out like being like their main sponsor or whatever, and so I like gave all mine away. And then it was like, oh, sometimes I'll go grab this or whatever, like from Sephora, and then it became a whole thing. And then I was like, okay, I'll go to Ulta, and then it became a whole thing. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
what is going on? It's like insane.
I know. That's actually what has just been so amazing about XXXY, though. I mean, you even look at the brands like Nike, like the biggest athletic brands
Hmm.
in the country, and they've all been so negatively politicized. And so I'm just so grateful that this is a brand that I can buy. It is actually some of the best quality athletic stuff I own. Like, have never owned a better pair of leggings in my life. And you can
Leggings are
feel good
important for a
about buying
lady.
it. I know. Yes, you don't have to have the guilt of like knowing you're supporting these completely ridiculous agendas.
Yes. And it's so hard sometimes because I'll pass these stores and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so difficult. Or like all it's like none of this stuff was happening, like for example with Disney And
Mm.
my husband and I, when we first got married, we were like, we're gonna go on our honeymoon to Disney World. And like a month or two before, like all this stuff started to hit the fan, and I was like, oh my gosh.
No,
I was like,
not
no, the
Disney
things are
too.
bought. And then I mean, we went because the things were the tickets were bought. I was like, we're
Hmm.
gonna go, but it made me feel like I had to like wear sunglasses and like make sure
Yeah.
people like didn't know who I was, like keep my head down, like please nobody be like, why are you here? You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
And so one question before my last question, because and I didn't include this on what I sent, but I feel like I would be, remiss to not ask this for the Steve Day Show fans, because obviously a lot of people who watch him watch me because of the
Mhm.
namesake, which is fair and appreciated.
Mhm.
And I get this question a lot. I don't know if you do. I get this question a lot. Like what is it really like to have Steve Dace as your dad? Like people will ask that because on air he's like blah 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 blah, and he's just like not
Yeah.
like that in person. And
Mhm.
so I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, what is it like to have Todd Erzen as your dad? Is he like this all the time? People ask me that all the time about my dad.
Yeah, I think I would not be like anywhere the person I am today if he wasn't the way that he is. And I mean, I genuinely don't think I would have made it, even if just looking at sports, I don't think I would have made it to Arkansas if he wasn't the way that he is. I mean, um, he just has like a tough love that has brought the best out of me in everything, whether it's like sports or faith or just life and being willing to speak out. And especially in today's society, people are just so scared to speak the truth because the truth is offensive. Like God tells
Mhm.
us the truth will offend. Um, and he has just shown me so well what it looks like to like be so bold in the truth, but to also be loving, because the truth is love. And so that's probably the biggest takeaway that I've gotten from him, and it's just shown me how to do the same and given me the courage and the strength and the confidence to be able to speak out and make a difference in my own small ways. So
I love that. I love that. See, I always have positive things to say about my dad too when people ask, and people are always shocked when I tell them that. People are
mhm.
always like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, like he's probably my biggest inspiration in my life." And
Uh-huh.
people are like, "Wow, okay." I'm like, "Okay, bye," like done, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, he's made me better. It hasn't always been fun. It's been a
Right? Yeah,
hard
I get
journey and
that.
there's been some
I
hard
get that.
combos, but yeah, he's made me better.
And so my last question for you um is, what is your advice? We touched on it a little bit, but it's hard. I mean, it's it can be easy in a sense once you get past this hurdle of like, okay, like you said, I'm standing up for truth, I'm doing what God has called me to do, but there's this like hurdle before you get to that point where it's like you have like a little bit of fear because that's the devil in you being like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And so, what is your advice to young women out there who are having a difficult time, standing up to men, or even sometimes standing up to fellow women who are standing up for men in women's fields? What is your advice to them?
Yeah, I think for me, what gave me the courage was just to, first of all, just be educated on biblical truth, because if you do that, like you're gonna have at the very least a sense of peace. And then also just if you are informed on the issue, you there's just too many facts to not
Mm,
feel confident in stepping out. If you look at the cases of girls who have dealt with it, the numbers behind all of it, um, for me, what was so eye opening to just continue to do what I was doing was I had the opportunity a few months ago to talk to a girl on the San Jose State volleyball team, and she was just describing to me how hard the whole process had been for her because in a team sport, especially with volleyball, I mean, she's setting the ball to this man in all of her games
yeah.
who's then able to spike it over the net with way more power and force than any girl could into the faces of these women on the other side. And she just broke down and said, I've worked my whole life to get to this point in my sport, and now I feel like I have to choose between like my morals and what I know is right,
Mm,
or this thing that I've dedicated my whole life to achieving. And just seeing that and seeing the other stories that have happened across the country, like how could you not say something? So I think just continuing to be informed, continuing to look at those situations, and just forcing yourself to take the first step. Because I promise, if you just put yourself out there, you are going to gain so much more support than you think, and that's going to give you like just kind of the community and the confidence that you need to keep moving forward.
Well, thank you so much for, taking the time to be on. I appreciate it. Obviously, you have nothing else to do. It's not like you're busy at all. But um no, but why don't you tell people, like where they can follow you and keep an eye on, the stuff that you're doing with Riley Gaines and against NCAA, and then where to go for the clothing brand XXXY.
My Instagram is Ainsley_Erzen. My X is Ainsley Erzen. And then to check out XXXY, just go to xxxy.com. And then you can also follow them on Instagram and X. And then also make sure to check out Icons on Instagram and X just to follow all the updates on the lawsuit, everything that's going on with that as we move forward.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I really appreciate it and you taking the time.
Yes, of course. Thank you for having me.
And that was episode 8 of Let's Talk about women's sports. Thanks so much.